Do you like conversation on a variety of topics? Feel like no one wants to talk about the things that interest you? Tired of only hearing the same political, sports, or catastrophe talk? Yeah, we feel that way too. Join two high-functioning geeks as they discuss just about anything under the sun. We can't tell you what we'll be talking about each week because we don't know where our brains will take us. It will be an interesting conversation though, so hang on and join us. Here comes the Relentless Geekery. Alan, what's up?
All right.
Back
Let's see. I don't have a. So let's see. Let me get my volume up because I need to be able to hear us.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Perfect. And in fact, give me a moment to change my background because this is I'm ill served by my actual. Let's see. Oh, and I guess I have none. That's why I don't have a current one. The latest update to Zoom has stolen all of my. How interesting. Okay. Then I guess. So let's see if do I need to have some kind of light? There we go. Let's do that. Okay. And hey, get rid of plastic bags so I don't look totally unkempt. There. Now this is what it looks like.
To cover up. That way you don't have to clean stuff up.
Exactly. Well, it's kind of funny. This is the calendar's behind me and the clutter is how I am, how I work. So okay. You are much more festive than I am. Pretty boring today. I had my Think shirt on earlier, but I actually took a shower and got ready for the world. So here I am. I don't know.
So how's life been? How have things been going?
So good. I'm home now. When last we casted, I was still in California dealing with the aftermath of my father having passed away, and things are very stable. We did a ton of stuff. That again. Kind of trying to find the geek component. It's amazing how much legal stuff there is involved. You know what I mean? To be able to declare someone dead to the world, and then the ripple effects that creates when you inform the employer, they inform Social Security, they inform whoever your 401k holder is, in this case, Vanguard. And so we didn't try to conceal anything, but we were kind of trying to do the phased rollout, if you will, that we knew who we were going to be talking to and make sure that we had our documents ready. And for instance, getting a death certificate is really a matter of like a governmental body that really does say, yes, he's gone. So it's a matter of not only examining the body, but the mortuary vouches for it and whatever else it might be. Here's a really geeky thing I learned. So my dad's last will and testament asks that he and my mom both be cremated. My mom is still alive, but he was going to be cremated. Right. As my older brother was going through, there's a sheaf of papers that you have to sign to say, yes, you received him, if you will, when the police found him there who took receipt. He was in cold storage, wasn't going to be embalmed because there wasn't a need for a showing. We were going to do cremation. And then somewhere in the papers, he saw mention of hydrolysis. I have never heard of that before. Apparently, that's a process. It's been around for a long time, like since the 1880s, where they kind of under pressure break a body apart with water, just like a body gets loose in the water on all those cop shows. Well,
that's interesting too, because I shared and I felt, oh my gosh, the timing. We talk about the synchronicities at times. There was a company that just started something like that, offering it, and they were talking about the environmental impact and how both burying people and cremation, how bad it is for the environment, and how this is an extremely environmental friendly alternative.
It really is a green thing. One thing I learned, it's alkali hydrolysis, and that makes sense. Whenever they show, like, I don't know, on Breaking Bad, that they're going to put a body in a bathtub and dissolve it with acid, that doesn't work anywhere near as well as like quicklime. You know what I mean? That's what they really have traditionally put on a body in the grave, and that ages the whole like degenerative or decomposition process is a better way to put it. Well, we then specified, since my dad specifically said cremation, and my parents knew enough about alternatives, green and otherwise, it was like, well, even if the process kind of is the same, what it does is kind of remove the flesh, leaves the bones. The bones are what get still burnt, cremated, and that becomes the cremains. And so in the overall, it wasn't like we were going to get a bag of wet goo, you know what I mean? Which was my first thing. Is like,
Yeah.
I kind of want it to be like ashes, siftable or whatever like
Right.
that. It turns out that the final step is still that burning bones, but of course it's much less bones being burnt. I don't know how much percentage of your body your bones are, 30%, something like that. I wish I was more anatomically aware, but that's what gets done. And you still get cremains and all that kind of stuff. But it just was, I don't know, even that thought of, wow, it seems to be equivalent and it is greener. My parents might have gone for it, but they said it in their will, and I want to abide by their wishes, even though he's not anywhere to be proud of the fact that we did as he requested. You know what I mean? So it just was, as you look through the various different documents, it's amazing the level of detail and how much you have to. It wasn't contentious. It wasn't like we were being tricked or anything like that, but it really is. You have to get down to a level of detail anytime that there's anything legal that ordinary life just doesn't require. You know what I mean? Everybody just does 90% good enough, et cetera, et cetera. But when you start dealing with the law, and not only the police who found him, but the mortuary who accept all that kind of stuff, and all the things now of most places you need a death certificate in order to be able to move forward with.
Yeah.
My mom is the inheritor, but she's advanced Alzheimer's, so she's not capable of making decisions for herself. So the whole point of getting my dad taken care of and moving towards, yes, he really is declared dead, was so that we could, my older brother being the executor of the estate will also be the conservator of her. And there's a distinction there that I really didn't have to be aware of up until now. And so, I don't know, learning all about the facility that she's in, that my dad had kind of taken care of in the selection and the choices, and then finding out, well, now we really have to be aware of what the standard of care is, and making sure my mom is safe and fine. And from all signs, it really is that way. There's no signs of elder abuse. The facility is nice and clean and smells nice, and the people seem nice and stuff like that. But boy, having someone like really in your hands, it's a whole different level. Like I haven't had children. I've never known what it is like to have a true dependent. You know what I mean? You have. So it's been, I never mind learning new things under time pressure, learning new things where the possibility of a mistake, the damage could be high. It was stressful, but then I also read recently about, stress that comes as a challenge instead of as a constant cortisol induced panic mode. That's its own thing. And so I guess we did a lot of communication between the brothers. We talked to all the right people. Of course, in the era of COVID, you can't just say, hey, we'll stop by your office. There's all kinds of impact like that. And in the overall, I think that we're now in a good place where the house is stable. We'll be going to make sure that it gets cleared out and cleaned out and ready for sale. In the middle of all this, my older brother was selling his own house. And so that's a level of stress times, not doubled, but quadrupled. I'm sure there's a geometric factor there. You know what I mean? It's the inconvenience, the nerve of my father having died at an inconvenient time.
But when is it ever really convenient? You always run into that. It's just an interruption. I know this sounds callous, but it's an interruption to everyone's lives, and you don't want to. There's nothing really great about it,
Yeah. It's honestly, of course we've had, I don't know, I maintain a sense of humor kind of all the time, even though it might be dark humor and stuff like that. But I'm aware that I'm under stress because I can tell how often I like tear up or have a reaction or have an overreaction that's different than my usual, and even in everything, in dealing with my brothers and dealing with Colleen and dealing with me, like I made a little post of, it's so interestingly nice to me how much it mattered that I got home. It was like my bed is just right, and the temperature in the room and the darkness of the room is right, where I really wasn't sleeping a lot out in California. I never seem to have acclimated to their West Coast time. I've never had that happen before. Usually like one overnight and then I'm on their schedule. But instead I was continually waking up at like 5 a.m, 8 o'clock here. And I guess it was good because that way I always had that time in the morning to do my spreadsheets and think of what's got to happen for the day and clean the kitchen, whatever it was that I was contributing. Everybody kind of went to their natural stuff. And I guess I realized I'm very much a natural organizer. I have the ability to juggle a whole bunch of balls and not drop any. And other people might prefer task-oriented type stuff, get this wall cleared or get the mailbox replaced or whatever else it might be. So it was a learning opportunity for all of us. And that still now, there's how many things am I going to be thinking of my father? I'm watching the Olympics, and I remember like watching the Olympics with my parents growing up. That's kind of funny. That's one of the most constant things in my life. I remember going back to like 64. You know what I mean? I was 5 years old, I guess. And it's just, and even more memorably, 68 with Beeman breaking a record and the Fosbury flop. I think it was 60, maybe 72, and the power salute and stuff like that. But that was a constantly shared thing with my parents all the time I was growing up. And so, of course, while I'm watching, I'm like, wow, I can hear their voices in my head of commenting on, with their favorite countries, you know what I mean, their home countries, and how I still have a warm spot for Germany and Lithuania because that's where they're from. Anyway, and their favorite events and whatever else it might be. So I'm going to have his voice in my head forever. You know what I mean? All those little, what would dad do kind of a things. And boy, he would really appreciate this. And this was his favorite meal and whatever. And in that case, I won't be having that because one of his favorite meals was liver and onions. And so it's like, have we talked about that?
No.
That my dad would make a point of eating out because my mom couldn't stand to make it. She couldn't stand to touch organ meat. That's so like when we made giblets gravy from the turkey, I was always the one that kind of took charge of that because it didn't weird me out as much as it did her. But sometime in the army or young life, he really developed a taste for liver and onions. And it's kind of funny. Now we know organ meat. Oh my God, that's the filtration system. That's got heavy metals in it. There's a lot of reasons not to do it. But once in a while, we'd go to a fancy restaurant, and what he wanted more than anything else was that taste. Isn't that interesting? And anyway, there wasn't the smell in the house or my mom having had to do it. It was really a treat for him. So oh well. So sorry, I'm kind of babbling. I'm sure.
It's one of those things. Everyone has to deal with that at some point, and like you said, he wasn't 50, you're not 20. So and again, it sounds callous just to say it, but it's an expected thing. It's part of life. Everyone, expects at one point your parents are going to pass on. And every parent is like, please don't let my kids die while I'm still alive. That's the worst, kids. And I said this before, I know people get upset about it, but I'm like, when you're a kid, at some point in your adult life, you realize my parents are going to die before me. There's going to be a time in my life without them. If you don't realize that, you probably have a much harder time when it happens. So it's just one of the, and saying it, oh my God, people go like, it's that mortuary humor that people just can't handle at times.
Exactly. It's kind of funny, I've come up with, what's the phrase? It was like, not unexpected, but still a surprise. Yes. There's a thing about, as you live longer, every year you live longer, the odds of you living even longer after that go up. You show that you have whatever the genetics and the hardiness that you're making it through. And so my parents are both 89. They lived a very good life, to see most of a century. That's just an amazing, think of living from 33 on and being like, they made it as the Depression was ending and the world was shifting. They made it through World War II. They made it through immigrating to a new country and building a new life. The incredible changes in radio, going to television, going to the internet, going, and what's cool, one of the joys of my father really prepared, instead of it being an incredible treasure hunt and archaeological dig to try to figure out all of their affairs, he was canny enough, he was computer savvy enough that so many things you could get into the accounts, and all of his names and passwords were, in the keys to the kingdom file and that kind of stuff. And of course, that inspires me to have created a keys to the kingdom file. My name, but not his. But you know what I mean? That I would like it to be that whenever Colleen and I pass away, knock on wood, not for another 100 years. You know what I mean? As nanotech, kicks in and stuff like that. I would like it to be that it's not terrible for my successors, my survivors, that instead, a little bit of Swedish death cleaning, a little bit of keeping my affairs in order, your passwords are available, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Even in death, they're setting a good example of, wow, this is so much easier than it has been from any number of stories that I've heard of where it was just totally unknown where things were. Do they have a safe deposit box? Don't know. They had too many accounts, multiple banks, which is the main one. All of that. Where are their investments? Are there any investments? You know what? Where's the deed to the house and to the car and whatever else it might be? Wow.
See, now you're making me think. I mean, my geek brain, to get things ready for the kids at some point, I need to start doing things like changing the passwords to like 57 characters of all random numbers and stuff, and then make the very last thing they go look at, make the password like, don't you wish the rest of them were this easy, or something like that. Little things like that. So it is kind of a treasure hunt, but yep, that's, like, yeah, of course he did that type thing.
Right. This is kind of funny. I think I mentioned, I have pretty secure passwords. They're relatively long and they're often based on song lyrics or something that is obscure enough. My dad used like Lithuanian words and German words.
Yeah, that's what you
know
said.
What I mean? Like who's going to be mentioning like this is the place that he and my mom met, and you'd have to. And it wasn't that he then, I'll go take one of those clickbait quizzes and give it all up. It really was interesting to see kind of how his mind worked and what was important to him and would be memorable to him.
And savvy enough to think of that. That's awesome.
Exactly.
It's kind of like the Navajo wind talkers from World War II, the code.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's especially Lithuanian. I mean, there's maybe place names and so forth because the Lithuanian alphabet is Cyrillic. It doesn't all translate into the Roman alphabet, if you will. And so automatically there's a little bit of German. How do you portray an umlaut or an eszett in, but it was just, I don't know. It's one of those things like I want to take a note of him and say, so what did that place mean? You know what I mean? Like I know that Kaunas is where he was born and Vilnius is the capital where I think he went to school, but every other one of those things, I think it is, look, that's where he met mom and that's where he emigrated to the United States and all those kinds of things. I think he at one point had written a memoir about, and maybe I've talked about this before. I'm sorry, I sometimes repeat myself. They were displaced persons. You know what I mean? Lithuania was one of the countries just caught between the Russian and the German forces, and so there's all kinds of terrible stories about running back and forth, getting out of the line of fire with armies around, families getting separated, etc. He was on a train in Dresden that got pulled out of the city, and no one really knows why, before the firebombing hit. Like Slaughterhouse 5, Kurt Vonnegut, Dresden as a city was a beautiful place, and it ceased to be. It was firebombed down to the ground, and Vonnegut only survived because he was like in a meat locker, if I remember correct, a facility underground that survived the incredible devastation. And that's how it was for my dad. If that train hadn't been pulled out, and some people chose to stay and they didn't make it. So, why are me and my brothers here? Because happenstance, whoever got word, whatever lucky thing happened to get that train just outside of the zone of Dresden, that they survived. There's huge, I'm sure that many, many people who've been through the war have terrible stories like that. My mom's parents were separated for like 10 years while they found each other.
Wow.
It's amazing to think of that level of disruption. And yet they made it and started in the United States, started in Chicago, worked on learning English. My dad was actually a polyglot. He spoke multiple languages because when you have to learn to speak Russian because the Russians are around, you get real good at it real quick. And same with German and same with English.
That kind of just proves, things happen for a reason, because they needed to be on that train to get out for the sole purpose that we're here to make the podcast. That had to be the only reason.
Yeah, exactly. In my solipsistic, the universe exists because I do.
Right.
Yeah, that's the right way to look at it.
That's got to be it. And it's kind of funny because Gina had like a lot of deaths. 4 people in her family died last year. None from COVID, but from many other things and bad things. There was a suicide, there was a homicide, there was cancer, and then there was just getting old, wearing out. So it was very devastating. And the year was very difficult for her. And one of the people was her father, who I didn't get to know tons, but this was one of my introductions to my father-in-law. Mm-hmm. Is he sent a note about something. I forget what it was. But he made sure to go and get a doctor's prescription pad for Cialis. He said, just in case you need that also. That was my introduction to my father-in-law. And well,
That's hilarious.
I met her.
Thinking of you.
Yeah, we were at Sarah's graduation party, and we were eating at the restaurant. We sat down, and Gina was next to me with her mom there, and she's like, "Mom, this is Steve." I'm like, "Hi, how you doing?" She goes, "Hi." She reaches around Gina, slides her hand down into my shirt, and rubs my chest, and I'm like, "Hello, how are you doing?" So that was my in-laws. Okay, so every now and then, Gina will get mad at me or something, or I'll do something or say something, and she gives me a look. I'm like, you know what? Your father would think that's funny. She's like, damn you, he would. And she's always like, you got to say that, because he absolutely would say that. He would do that. And I know sometimes people will like, well, how can you joke about her father? He's dead. Because he would appreciate it. And it's part of if you try, not joking like that is more forgetting him, in my opinion. I'm keeping him alive more, and he appreciates that, or would. So I think, I know it sounds bad, but sometimes I think we're too down. Oh, someone died and we can't ever talk about them. I don't want that. I told my kids, I don't want that. Remember the fun stuff, joke.
Exactly. That's very much what I want for mine, is the celebration of life. You know what I mean? Tell your favorite story where we just rolled on the floor laughing. Tell where we did something that we just had an adventure, that kind of thing. Yeah. I don't want it to be somber. I want it to be that, my time on earth made a lot of other people happy. Let's do that. Let's share that cool
Agreed.
stuff. You know what I mean? So,
and I always joke with Gina, whenever like bad weather and she wants me to run out to the store or something, I'm like, you upped my insurance again, didn't you? Well, I joke that she's upping the health insurance and putting me in predicaments.
Exactly.
So, hey, also, you mentioned passwords. I'll do a little quick aside geekery on the passwords. So I use one of those vaults that stores all your passwords
Right.
to get to, secured vault type thing. They have part of their program that they will generate passwords for you. Right. And it has been 12 characters, random, upper, lowercase, symbols, numbers, a little bit of everything randomly. Well, they just recently did an update, and now it's 16 by default. So they're, things are moving beyond just making a 6 or 8 character password.
Exactly. Honestly, mine's been like 30 for a long time. You know what I mean? I have like I said, a certain character string and some embedded capitals versus that. I have what they always ask for, special characters, a number, that kind of stuff. I'm proud of my number string, because it's one of those things that I don't think anybody would ever guess it. It's not the obvious, oh, Al's birthday, Al's graduation, when they got married. It's none of those things. It really is like memorable to me, and to the rest of the world, they'd be, where did that come from? So I'm hoping that that's a little ace in the hole in that way. Right. Apple has, as part of their same thing, their password storage, they also generate keywords, and I think that theirs are 16, if I remember right. But everything about passwords says if you're going to use them, the longer the better. It doesn't even matter necessarily the scattering of characters. Dictionary attack is only the first thing. When you've got things now that can do 1 trillion transactions in a second or whatever like that, you just need to be, how do you get it so that act of factoring primes takes the longest that it possibly can? And I know I'm terribly mixing between real technologies and cryptography and that, but I've tried to make it so that I have, maybe because I'm good at song lyrics, I know exactly what it says. I don't have a question of whether it's a or the, you know what I mean? And that just kind of flows out of my fingertips nowadays.
Yeah.
And that's, oh no, hey, everyone who's looking to break into Al's systems, the only thing that's bad is I don't know that I have unique passwords everywhere. I have, for my big main accounts, they're separate, but I have certain ones that I've reused foolishly. I know you're not supposed to do that, but there's overhead associated with that. And another cool thing that's happened lately is multiple browsers, and maybe even like password utilities like OnePass or LastPass and that kind of stuff. They actually will search the web for you and look for data breaches, and where yours was one of the ones exposed, or they'll look for, you've got a password that you set 20 years ago on AOL when it was 6, 8, 10 characters, and that's out in the wild now. So you should go change it here. And in fact, all these other places that you might not remember you used it. You went to a magazine price search site, and their security is for shit. You know what I mean? We're not talking about Vanguard or Amazon. We're talking about kind of a server in a back room of a strip mall or something like that.
And mine even will say, this isn't very secure. We found 29 other people out on the web that have used this password. So, it makes you go, oh, and you're right. I mean, sometimes there's something on my phone, or especially if I'm in Linux and I'm doing something, I'm like, I don't want to, because I have to, the program I use to store doesn't have a Linux client. So I then have to transfer it. But if I'm not anywhere, I'm like, so I've done that too. But every time I pull mine up, it says red alert, these 63 passwords need attention immediately. So every now and then I go through and I'll change those, update them, make sure it's all stored, and it reduces that. So those really do help. And honestly, if that company goes out of business or something, I'm in trouble. If I can't remember the main password, I'm in trouble because it's all there, and they're all different. Every password, my kids complain so often. What's the Amazon password? And I copy it and send it to them. They're like, how am I going to remember that? I'm like, you're not supposed to. That's the idea.
That's the point. Exactly. I read long ago, way back in the birth of computing, there was a really cool guy named Phil Zimmerman who invented PGP, pretty good privacy. And his theory was, it's important to have everybody have access to encryption for security, for privacy, for being able to prove your identity and so forth, and to make it as seamless as possible. And all kinds of like password saving sites and so forth, they learned good practices from seeing what PGP did. And then I think GPG, which was the open source version of that. There's also a great book by Bruce Schneier, multiple great books. I think one called Beyond Security, if I remember right, but he talks about the why the longer is better, and the psychology of it, and how in the era of quantum computing, like, we're going to have to move away from passwords and get into biometrics and things that are, you have to have your phone or a token of some kind. They've tried various different things where to get that level of security and privacy and identity verification, we're going to have to move away from things that just you can throw enough computing power at it that you really can break. And you probably have seen the chart, right? Depending on how many digits, it goes from, it'll take 24 years to break it, to 10 years, to 2 years, to 2 fucking minutes. You know what I mean? That if they want to break into you, so that's. And
I just saw that, like, Bitcoin, which is one of the biggest, longest encryption, and it takes normal computers days, weeks, hours, or months to do this encryption, where they said within the next 10 years, we'll have quantum computers that can break it within a minute.
They're working on everything about blockchain is based on good security. And indeed, that's how are we going to get ahead of that? So that's a fascinating topic. Maybe that's one of the things I have to do, like a good Mensa talk about, is that not only the history of how we got here, but what are the things that are being looked at in the future. And that already, as you know, thumbprints, they're getting away actually from Touch ID, because apparently that's relatively easily stuntable. Then it's Face ID, then it's Face ID with a mask on. It's not only typing something, it's the cadence by which you type that it's going to start tracking. When I go that it really needs to match within a close enough parameters that it's you typing it, not just someone typing it in. So I love that. And I really do love it. The battle back and forth between the white hats and the black hats, the good guys and the bad guys, as to they keep upping the ante and these guys break it. And then it's very cool. If there's any place where human ingenuity and human greed have played together, like, why are you willing to throw so much computing resources at this? Well, because you can get the keys to the kingdom. What if I take over the Social Security server? What if I get into, and get root at Amazon? And I'm talking bullshit. There's all kinds of things in place that physical security still matters more than, but it's there's also it's the bear theory, right? I don't have to be perfectly secure. I have to be more secure than all the people that have password as their password.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? The low-hanging fruit, as long as I take myself 2 and 3 and 4 branches above that, it's just not worth their time, because they've got so many other pigeons out there that they can.
And that's the thing. I've been watching these videos about the scammers. Honestly, there's probably less people out there trying to crack through passwords and that, because it is so much work for such little gain. Whereas they're finding the social aspect is much more lucrative and easier, and they can trick people to, like you said a little bit ago, filling out, hey, this quick little quiz on Facebook, pass it to your friends. Like? Yeah. Or calling them on the phone or sending them emails. You know, you get the emails now, and I get all the time people like, hey, is this real or is it fake? Did you buy something from them? Well, no, then it's fake. Don't click it. Don't answer it, you know? But the malware, the ransomware, the scammers talking on the phone, you know, all those are big. So it's kind of funny that it's just too much work, and people don't understand that the social aspect is where they get a lot of the, you know, break into stuff. Exactly. You give them permission.
Yeah, that's, you know, gosh, in the same way that we've talked about, you know, what you go to school for is not only reading, writing, and arithmetic. They started to add like social things like how to cook or how to do, you know, back when people really did do working with wood and metal, you really wanted to have some hands-on experience. Nowadays, of course, they should be having like a class in civics, so you know how you as a citizen work. And of course, they should have it all about computers. They have all the extension courses. You know, we get regular catalogs from Lakewood that say, here's all the things that are being offered. And it's not just pottery, it is computer security for elders. Here's how to use Excel or Word or the Microsoft suite. Here's how to just go online and be safe. That's absolutely for the people that really want to have those things, but didn't grow up with it. You know, they're I don't know, these kids nowadays are really like wonderful and fearless with how they do everything on their phone, and they really are aware of how social media works and stuff like that. That is not the case with people who were a little scared of computers in the first place, and now there's so much in the world that you have to, like, you can't run your TV without logging on to Netflix or Roku or Amazon or whatever else it might be. So it's, I don't know, maybe I'll end up being one of those teachers, you know what I mean? It's not to make money, it's more like, hey world, I know a certain amount about this, and I think that I can explain it in a way that it isn't meant to be techno priest garbage, you know, jargon and stuff like that. So maybe that's something I should offer to Lakewood, just for my, or to, you know, I don't know, it's kind of funny. Why am I looking to be busier? But because, you know, I'm good at it, because I'm good at explaining, and I'm good at those things in particular. You know what I mean? So
it's, you mentioned the school and stuff. I did the talk I've been mentioning. I did it twice on Saturday down in Cincinnati, and I did the workshop with the kids on Sunday. Both went very well, but it was interesting to get some of the pushback from a couple of the parents. When I'm talking about how things have changed, how our kids can't go get jobs at McDonald's, you know, and I even mentioned, I'm like, when was the last time you had a kid pump your gas and check your oil at the gas station?
Which there's like a standard start off job.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, they have disappeared. And I'm talking about all the options that kids have now, and how they're in control, and how that's actually more secure than going to work for somebody. There's, you know, I personally went to work one day, was told, we're downsizing, you were the last one hired, you're gone. I had no control over that. And it wasn't because I wasn't good. And I've had more control since then. And I just got pushback from a couple people. I mean, the one guy said, there's no way I want my kids to be driving Uber for a job. And I don't want these piecemeal jobs where they never know where their paycheck's coming from. And I didn't even have to defend it. Some of the other parents said, what do you mean? They're like, you don't get this. They said, I know people with a master's degree that were lucky to get a job at Walmart, and, you know, and things like that. They're like, this is an option we didn't even know is possible. And I said, and the kids can start doing these skills. The video game storytelling, this one girl was doodling while I was talking, and I looked at the picture. I said, okay, that's it. You're an artist for video games. And she looks at me, I says, they need people to do art. And her mother's like, really? I'm like, yeah, start building a portfolio. She's 13. By the time she's 18, she could have a portfolio of drawings. She could have you could get on
NFTs, you know what I mean? Yeah,
she could get on Fiverr, have her mom set up an account on Fiverr, and she could start drawing things for people for $5-10. She could start offering there's companies in Cincinnati that do mobile games. She could do art for some of that. And as an intern or something, get the experience. I said, believe me, at 18, if she does some of this stuff now, because she loves drawing, she could say, look, I've earned this much working on Fiverr. I've done this for this video game. Here's my portfolio of things.
Every one of those things builds your portfolio. Exactly. Yeah. Legitimacy.
Yeah.
That's right.
No video game company out there is going, we want somebody with a 4-year degree to come and program for us. They want, how much experience do you have?
That's right.
So, you know, and I'm not saying don't go to college, but I was trying to get through this guy's head that this is where the future is and gives kids a better chance. And the kids that would drop out of school, drop out of college, the kids that are troubled and don't see a future. You know, we hear all those schools that the kids, the dropout rate, the gangs, the problems that the parents are all on welfare or whatever. You've got areas like that. And these kids are like, I see no future. I'm going to join that gang. They give me money in my pocket right now. Well, look, you can code a video game. You have a future. Psychologically, doesn't that seem like it would be something that could be good?
So plug yourself, by the way. What's the name of the course that you've been teaching? You know what I mean? It really would be, this sounds like something that it shouldn't only be in Cincinnati. It should be everywhere and you should do it. So,
yeah, I'm working on that. And actually, you mentioned Lakewood a while back. So that was on my added to my list of places to target to teach at. And I was actually going to talk to you and see if monthly CAM meeting needs a speaker at some point.
They sure do. In fact, I think that even in March, like next month, they're currently hurting for a speaker. And so if you're whatever the last Wednesday is, you might want to get in contact with Brett Clark, who is our current programming chair. She would probably love to have you.
Yeah. Okay. So the two I teach and they're connected are right now, these are the titles that could change, but Supercharge Your Kids, teaching parents what they can do now to prepare their kids for the workforce later. You know, they're not going to work McDonald's. You know, those jobs are disappearing. They've got, Taco Bell is doing an experiment. I don't know if you saw this a while back. I think it's New Mexico, where when you drive up, they don't have an inside. I mean, how many places don't do inside eating at all anymore?
Exactly.
So you drive up to the little speaker and essentially Siri is there talking to you to take your order. Okay. It's, you know, some AI, and that AI then sends the order to a burger making machine, which puts stuff all together and spits it out the slot. There's one guy sitting in there reading the newspaper, making sure
the machine doesn't need refills of whatever juices. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So that's the type of thing that, you know, if that exists, why are they hiring people with all the problems they've been having with, you must raise our, you know, it's just the reality.
Minimum wage, customers pulling a gun, all of that.
Yeah.
Who wants to work a minimum wage Joe job anymore?
Yeah. And one lady even said a friend of hers, their son, when he was a senior, because, you know, sometimes when you're senior, you have more free time. You get study halls, or you don't have to take these classes or whatever, because you're ahead of the curve on that and all that. So he would go out and DoorDash in between classes and saved up enough money his senior year that he bought a car.
I've not heard of that before. That's an incredible. I mean, it's kind of funny. I always think, well, don't distract yourself from school, but he's on top of it.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
So anyway, but that's that class. And then the associated one is more for kids, because when everyone says, oh, I want to make video games, what do they think of? Coding, programming.
Right.
But as you know,
all kinds of things. There's story and art and all the production aspects, as if making a movie. They need gaffers and key grips.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, you can look into being a fluffer, but that's totally different talk. But I was telling them, and that's when I told her, I said, they don't need everybody to program. If you program, great, but they need people to write stories. Writing, being hired as a game writer for stories, that job has only existed for about 10 years. The guys I've interviewed for my podcast, they said, 10, 12 years ago is when it started coming about. So you don't get degrees for it. You got to have the experience. You got to, you know, so that's the thing. And then the new talk I'm working on is, and again, this is all just being worked on now. Working title is Tomorrow's Young Entrepreneurs Today. Okay. Basically tying that in again, here's things kids can do right now that are jobs, earning money,
Okay.
and plus parents are always worried. My Gina's niece worked at Subway and they got held up at gunpoint. She got shot. So your parents worry about that. And I understand. Absolutely. Okay, well, here, let me tell you, your kid can draw, they can work and make a video game, and they're not getting shot at.
In the safety of their home,
Yes.
comfortable conditions, no commute, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. I'll tell you, all your things sound great. I mean, it really is. Whatever that thing is about trying to pass along, not just the wisdom of the elders, but like, here's the state of the world. Here's, you don't have to embrace all of it. We have to be aware that it's out there and that you can make use of it, or you can get kind of swept aside, get swamped by it, whatever else it might be. I think that all those classes it isn't, oh, now I have exactly the formula for how to do it, but everybody's going to come out of there with ideas, with energy. You know what I mean? Like, one of the wonderful things about being a teacher is you don't know the seed you plant until 40 years down the road. When you're saying, I had this great teacher named Mrs. Nerney, and she was, formative in making me a better person. And, I am who I am today because of this great history teacher or great math teacher or whatever else it might be. So about using technology to have a better life, about entrepreneurship and the self-discipline that has to go with that, you're hitting an interesting sweet spot as we move towards that. There's no more work 40 years and get a gold watch. You know what I mean?
I say that exact thing. That's exactly what I say. And my mother was the last person I knew that worked at the same job for 45 years.
For all of his life. Exactly like that. So I hope that you, as the world reopens, and as you know, it's not only so much you and I both get satisfaction out of personal speaking and stuff like that. That sounds like something you could also do. Hey, a nice little Zoom thing with 30 faces, the Brady Bunch kind of a thing and stuff like that. I've had an okay time doing those kinds of things. Some live and some this. Hats off to you. I hope this works out really well. So
and I'm tying it kind of all together with the books, coming out with that. I'm coming out with study guides for teachers and homeschool parents. That's a focus on helping kids to write better, to write stories. Because again, oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you, I got to do this. Did you see the thing on Facebook about the little 8-year-old that got his book into the library?
No. How did I miss this?
Oh my gosh, yes, this 8-year-old kid wrote a story. It's Dylan's Christmas Story by Dylan himself, something like that. And he wanted other people to read it. Who doesn't when you write a story? Sure. So he took it to the library and put it on the bookshelf for people to check out, not That's understanding really cool. Everything, but that he did it.
You got to get the number and the little spine thing and all that.
Okay. Better. The library
discovered it.
Yes, they found out about it. They're putting it in the system. There's something like a 2-year waiting list for the book now. That's and sweet. I talked to the library because, you and I you just start thinking of things. I'm like, so why don't libraries put a bookshelf where young kids can write a book and get it put on the shelf for people to check out? Exactly. And I talked to the library and they laughed. They said, yeah, we're actually working on that already. So now I'm going to approach my local library and say, what do we need to do to make this project happen? I already did some talks at the Rotary. So if we need some money, let's go talk to the Rotary. Let's get some money. Let's get some donations. Let's get a shelf and kids can write books and get them put in the library
and get them cataloged and get their ISBN number and it can make in the print on demand world. If it's like flying off the shelves and there's a 2-year wait, how about having 10 copies and that'll shrink that wait?
Yes.
Down.
Yeah.
So very cool.
So yeah, but I've got his mom's email and I'm going to contact her and see about interviewing him for my podcast.
Very good, man. That'd be that an 8-year-old. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
I will also say this. Some of my best talks that I've given at tech conferences and at Mensa and stuff like that it wasn't just, hey, there's the old saw that says, if you can't do, teach. I've never been only an academic. I've been in the trenches. And so then when you talk about, here's a trading system that I developed using genetic algorithms, and here's how they work. And here's, how I gather data. And I had to do data cleansing because even from big data sources, there's all kinds of crap out there. And I think it's important to be able to to the people who are looking to learn something, it gives you automatic credence when you can actually tell war stories. Here's how I came to this. Here's a real world problem I had to solve.
Yes.
It's not just the rarefied, oh, well, the way one writes an SQL query is like this. It's like, no, I had to get this to work within a certain amount of time because that was their production cycle. And so you had to write a better, less expensive, as they say, SQL query and stuff like that. And I don't know, you also have that when you're talking about being an entrepreneur, working, kind of like multiple jobs and seeing multiple balls in the air and seeing which one gets hot and then moving on with that. And you know what I mean? You've been, I think, very experimental and very much responding to market demand and what am I most enjoying and all those things. And that's how it isn't only doing it, it's like teaching people, what are you thinking while you're doing it? You know what I mean? Do you listen to music or not? And that seems trivial, but some of my best, we've laughed about it, some of my best productive writing is when I put on something instrumental that doesn't interfere with my words, but somehow there's energy that you get imbued with. And it's like, Osric Tentacles, thank you again. I'm just cruising along. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The Matrix soundtrack is like that for me.
Like that. Exactly. So,
all right. You mentioned a couple things you've watched and readited. So this House of X, I think I've read most of that, but it's been a while. You're just now catching up to it.
So just that, I have Comixology and there's a lot out there. And I often get on like a binge if I'm going to read a whole bunch of a certain writer or artist or a whole bunch of a certain genre. And because I have been doing a number of those things, I don't always stay current, or they don't even become available on Comixology until they're anthologized or whatever. So this Jonathan Hickman, one of my favorite writers because he's so good at all that has gone before in the Marvel universe, and I think DC as well, but Marvel is where I'm most familiar with his work. He's great at like rarefying it, making it so that it really does hang together, and adding big concepts that are just, they make you look at things in a new light. So this is, if you know the tortured history of the X-Men, they've had all kinds of alternate histories, alternate dimensions, star-spanning adventures, et cetera, and to try to make sense of all that, you have to kind of like read them all and say, well, there's a couple gaps, but I really admire Chris Claremont's work and whoever has done those things. Man, he's done a fantastic job with this, about starting with where we are now and going like, now and 1 year and 10, 100 and way into the future, and bringing in Apocalypse and bringing in Nimrod and bringing in like what there's automatically a human mutant conflict, and what out of natural selection, which one's going to win. Well, that's not how everything in the real world gets decided. What are we dealing with right now? It isn't who's bigger, faster, stronger nowadays. It's who's smarter, who uses technology more. And so there's going to be this sentence of AIs and man-machine interface a la cyborgs or whatever else it might be. And so what are they going to think about either humanity or mutant kind? They're going to be, wow, let's wipe out that, carbon-based life form and go with beautiful silicon. And what are other, like, he did a great job of, here's the kinds of civilizations, the kinds of like galactic, like, what is the Shi'ar like? What is the Brood like? Why are they successful? Some of them are not an intelligent thing, but they're a very successful infestation, if you will. Others are, they to think of machines that worship a god of machine intelligence. A very interesting, the Technarch, boy, I'm just, as I'm reading it, my mind is expanding and expanding, because I thought I kind of knew this and I could have told you what matters in the X-Men universe. And he's just bringing in so many things that make sense, but also totally cool new directions. A whole new retelling of Moira McTaggart, and that her mutation is kind of like, there's a long time ago a book by maybe Frederick Pohl or something called Orn, that was a creature that phoenixes itself. It comes back with all of its same memories, and so you live 10 or 100 or 1,000 lifetimes, and you become quite aware of what's going on in the world, and successful in terms of continuing your existence, kind of like Highlander, if you will. But there's also that need to hide the fact that you don't age, because people will think you're a witch and burn you and things like that. So, man, it's great at the micro level of human emotions, but at the macro level of like what little butterfly effects happen here that expand outwards into this view of the future. they're fantastic. They're just
Hickman's
some of the best stuff
definitely
I've written, man. Wow.
he's definitely newer. You know, I mean, he's newer than Claremont and Kirby
Right.
and stuff. Obviously, the gods. But I agree that he's slowly becoming more of a name. He's going to be one of those that is talked about even more. That as the classic history. That this is it's Hickman. Yes, that's the good stuff. That type of thing. Because I know I get a lot of my input from Colin. I read this, it's great. We don't always agree, but I'll at least say, okay, well, Colin thinks it's good, let's check it out. And Hickman's been around a lot. He's one of those guys that they've started. So what do you want to do next? Because you're going to be successful.
He had a great run on Fantastic Four and on Avengers that were the same thing. Like that's where they did the universe is collapsing. Universes are actually competing to stay alive. The Council of Reeds, all the Reed Richards, all the smartest people on each of their planets in their universes were getting together and like, how are we going to decide how to stop this? And if we can't stop it, who lives and who dies? And like, what a huge concept that it's not just automatically like survival. There really might be a reason that the universe has sense or doesn't make sense. And if you're the smartest person in the world and you can't solve that problem, how do you back away from that and say, well, what's the best I can do? And, and Fantastic Four went away for a while after the big conclusion of that, because it turns out Franklin Richards, his son, has the ability to create, to bring whole universes into existence.
Yeah.
And so then they went exploring and creating universes and trying while this universe threatening a disaster was happening, the solution will be, like they've often said, wow, that universe died, and then it all came out the black hole into this new one and created new. I apologize for people say have much better way of talking about that, about creation versus destruction and that kind of thing. But and the Avengers with the gardeners, that for all of our why is humanity important? For all that we've now met all these spacefaring species, what is it about humanity that seems to be always there watching us? They're maybe trying to eliminate us. They're trying to deal with us. Like what's the spark in humanity that is so galactically significant? And that maybe there's others that are like, well, we don't think that way. We think that you're an anomaly and that we're, you know what I mean? So like, they're just looking at us as an experiment, a battlefield, it's very cool. He deals with scale very well. You know what I mean? That for all of our arrogance about how we got a god of thunder. Yeah, we got 10 of those over here. You know what I mean? And not only of thunder,
we have
but
a whole
quantum level. We've got quantum lightning. You know what I mean? He's very good at that. Cool. What's really unique? Wow. I'm just hats off to this guy, man.
And it once again shows that comics as a medium aren't kids. They're not jokey. They're not lesser media. I mean, there are people that used to, probably not as much, movies, and it's dismissive because Broadway is better. But movies have evolved to where there's some very intense across the board. Yes, you get the Cheech and Chong comedy crap. That's funny, but it's like eating Doritos. Right, and you get the very intense stuff like The Color Purple or something.
Or Inception, or The Color, exactly, emotionally and scientifically, and just the
Schindler's List.
Exactly, Memento. It's like,
and then you get something like Endgame, which encompasses multiple things, because that was heroes saving the world, sacrificing to save the world. And people are like, well, it's superheroes. But honestly, people got invested in those characters. When we left that theater, half my family was bawling their eyes out, and they couldn't stop it.
The big things that happened. Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's one of those.
We're probably going to go to the AG this year. We've missed a couple because of COVID complications. It looks like we're getting to the endemic stage. It looks like there's going to be a masking and a vaccination mandate at the AG in Sparks, near Reno. So I want to do a talk, and probably what I'm going to do is about comic book geography. I did that as one of the segments of what I taught at Baldwin Wallace, where Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is about to come out. And they're going to just wonderfully expand. We already saw this in the No Way Home Spider-Man movie, that there's multiple incarnations and they might be able to, different vibratory planes, different dimensions, whatever else it is, interact with each other. How does all that work? And I'm, already from the trailer, you can see, well, there's about 10 different versions of Doctor Strange, and him saying, well, I did what I had to do, and then it got out of hand. And I kind of want to say, boy, what we just talked about, comic books are so much bigger and cooler than people imagine. It is so much not Archie. It is so much not Little Lana. They're talking about like the alternity. Every time you make a choice, you create another universe. Those universes is how do they interact? When you have deja vu, are you thinking of, well, that's what happened in another universe, and I'm just one step ahead here? Or and sometimes corny, but now when they're looking at things as at a quantum level, I've read any number of scientific papers, and I hope that they're from reputable versus, hey, science websites that are like, there really are, there's the best way to explain some of the stuff that we see is the 10-dimensional superstring theory. There are multiple dimensions, and this literary portrayal of that, of the choices you make matter, but what if you could undo some of those choices? But what if there's ripple effects from that, so that you can't just go back and kill Hitler? It might be that you create a worse world because you don't know the ripple effects.
Right.
So I'm just looking forward to what they do here. And I want to talk about that. Like, look at how they built up to this.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not what it used to be. Heck, even Archie got dark with Riverdale and the zombies and the apocalypse and stuff.
Exactly.
But people, I mean, if you haven't read a graphic novel, there are some wonderful adult-oriented ones. Just because it's got art in it doesn't make it a lesser medium or storytelling, because there's such a variety out there. And honestly, we talk about how art can move us. Well, then why do we look down upon it when it's connected with word bubbles?
Exactly. I'm so I don't know that I have embraced, like in a snooty way, the idea of graphic novels, serial, one of the things I've always loved about comic books was the combination of that, the graphics and the words, and that your mind kind of like it fills in the blanks. There's lots of proof that says we don't live in the now. We are continually making sense of what we just saw and extrapolating from that to have a prediction of the future, so that comic books feel very like that to me, that while I'm reading it, I'm thinking, what's going to happen next? I'm going to turn the page. Oh, did it turn out like I thought or not? And the people that are really good at driving that crescendo forward to a very satisfying, just like I expected, but boy, that's great. Or turn the page like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Both of those things are very satisfying because they're like jokes, you know what I mean? Paraprosdokians that set you up to think a certain way and then take that left turn, and that little bit of surprise, that little bit of delight and humility at, my supposed future seeing facility. In this case, in 20 words, the guy fooled me. How brilliant is that? How efficient is that? You know what I mean? So I can't think of a time when I read a comic book that I didn't immediately really love that. Not only the word balloons, but the little descriptors and the parsimony of, here's a picture and it's describing what's going on in the picture, but it's also leading, there's a science. Scott McCloud tells you all about it, understanding comics, about how you do your pacing from panel to panel. And then some of those rules were broken by the Sterankos of the world, where things moved on the page, and it actually, the movement on the page was its own kind of swooping dynamic. And it's cool to see in my lifetime how much that's gotten better and better. And in fact, to go back to Hickman for a minute, another way in which you characterize a Hickman book is he creates glyphs and languages. And his way of showing what's happening, his little what has gone before, is not just a dry block of text. It's like he creates this whole thing that there's a theme, a motif for how the stories are told. You know what I mean? That you can tell his work, and I'm pretty sure it's him and not only the artist that's doing that. I'm pretty sure that he's got very specific things about what I want it to be. Is it has to look like a little bit of a computer readout, but then he makes it of a piece. There's an entire creation here, instead of only being 6 panels on a page and I'm going to work within that frame. You know what I mean? Wow.
One of my favorites is the Gunslinger series that they turned into comics, graphic novels, whatever you want to term it.
Yes.
Jay Lee did the art for it, and every page looks like an oil painting. And there's some just big splash pages with very few words that just capture it so perfectly that they
Yes.
don't need the words. And I know King was involved with those, and I just think they're fantastic. Something to definitely go look at if you're on the
Yes.
fence. Like, I've not looked at comics. This is a good example.
Exactly. The things you want to give somebody who's like not only not he's on the fence, but they're actually dismissive of it. It's like, look at how beautiful this is. Look at how
Right.
evocative this is. This isn't cartoony nothing. This is art. This is really perfect for the medium that it's in. Look at how they use color. Look at, wow. You know what I mean?
Right.
I know there's certain um artists that I really like that do that. That they um Jay Lee is one of them. I'm trying to think about Frazetta. You know, I've always been a big Frazetta fan.
Yes.
And, you know what I mean? Richard Corbin, that just, they leapt off the page. You could see muscles, sinew working and sweat. And, you know, when someone would get punched, it wouldn't just be bath. It would be like, you could see the face contorting under the force of the blow. How cool is it that someone takes the time to do that? You know what I mean? Instead of just being a little bit of sketch and making it look good enough, they stipple everything so that it really, I don't know, man. Sometimes it's like, well, that's why they're not prolific, because everything is a work of art. You know, Dave
Right.
it looks like this guy put a lot of, I don't even know that I'm getting all of it. I don't know that I'm understanding the detail and the illusions that he created with his collagey overlapping type stuff. So I kind of like, well, let's read through it and get the story. And then I'll read through it again and say, oh, that was the signifier of the puppet or something like that. You know what I mean?
And my friend Reese, big comic books. We grew up talking comic books and stuff. He's an artist. He's a graphic designer by trade. He will, when he gets a new book, and he doesn't do as much anymore, unfortunately, but he gets a new book, he will look through it, just looking at all the pictures before he even reads any of it.
Reads the story. Exactly.
So,
and different artists are really good with, like, some are very good at the big splash page, like you're saying. Some are good at character expressions. Instead of them being that all the women look alike and all the guys look alike, except for slight differences in jaw and hair, that instead they're really like, when someone, you know, does a little look of chagrin, look of surprise, look of lust, whatever else it might be, to capture that in a little tiny head on a, it's very cool that people have that, and like anatomy to make it so that the strain of a fight is really shown well, instead of it being biff bam pow. Brian Hitch is great at that. Kevin Nolan is great. Keith Giffen. There's certain people I just remember like, wow, this is different than what I've seen before. He's taking the time to really know the different face types, and that, you know, again, I want to show it to people, saying this is a step above. This is really worth acknowledging, that someone's doing something in the medium that's better than other people that have gone before him. Are people even going to be able to match this? You know what I mean? I love that.
I agree. And I think there's going to be some changes too to the comic world with, I mean, I know Colin denies it, but Amazon bought Comixology. They're shutting down the Comixology app, moving it into Kindle. They've started offering more independent publishing of comics through KDP. And digital isn't constrained by the same things pages are. There are things you can do digitally that you can't necessarily do. So I'm just wondering how much that's going to be embraced and how much it might change comics over the next 10 years.
Yeah, I just had my experience of Comixology. Like I said, I went online, you know, out of coming back, taking care of everything here that I had to, and then just going online to, you know, hey, let's play Civilization as my little meditation. I missed you so much. I didn't play for 2 weeks. So I went in and I read, you know, my Jonathan Hickman, like I'm talking about. One of the most satisfying things was I'm reading it like literally up until we started our podcast, and I glanced down and it's like, you're only 43% done of whatever volume you've got. Oh my God, I have more than half still to go. I was thinking I was on issue like 5 of 6 and I'm about to be sad. And instead, there's still more greatness to come. Isn't that so cool? Like when you grab a book and you look up and it's like, oh man, I'm only halfway through. Plenty of adventure still to go. You know,
right. You know, speaking of plenty of adventure, Peacemaker.
Oh my!
Did you see the end of it?
I watched it all. I just watched all that last night. Like I've been home since late Friday, and so have been catching up on various different things. And I think I was on episode 5. I had come to episode 5, so I watched 6, 7, and 8. And very satisfying ending. That there's all the carnage you wanted, all the humor, all the oh my god, can they do that on TV? You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. They absolutely have like inhabited the characters. That is, I don't know all the names. Whoever Cena plays Peacemaker, but whoever plays Vigilante is really good at being awesome. Like he's crazy and yet socialized crazy, and so it's just and. The threat was good with the butterflies and the carnage that had to happen in order to kill hundreds of people. You had to have your sonic boom mask and you had to have your anti-grav mask and stuff. It's really well done in terms of building tension and then using humor to relieve a little bit of that tension, but then it goes right back into the crunch of it. And just and the scene at the end, again, no spoilers, like who shows up at the end supposedly to handle the menace?
That was hilarious.
The JLA late to the party. And they even talk about that. Where were you, punks? It's already taken care of. I'm carrying my wounded because you weren't here.
It was the actors, Ezra and Momoa, at least.
At least that exact. I think they had the shadowy Superman floating in the air and whatever else. But they just had those cameos were really good. I'm loving that the world of movies and TV is more and more wonderfully interconnected. We already had that with Shield and with the Marvel series. I'm really loving that this was a really good 8-episode arc. I'm looking forward to seeing what James Gunn does more. He's kind of like some of my favorites. Jon Favreau really has an understanding of what makes a superhero things great. James Gunn has that really wonderful, irreverent sense of there really are galactic important things happening here, but people also screw up all the time. They're petty, they're vulgar, you know what I mean? Like when someone's trying to talk and they keep on making artificial farting noises as a way of dismissing them. It's like, it's so much 5 years old.
Yeah.
And yet, for the time, for that scene, it was just, that's what they would do. When you're under incredible pressure, you get goofy. You know what I mean?
And it didn't, you can't say that it broke this phenomenal new ground in storytelling or anything. It's like, they're going to win and save the world. Yeah, that this is going to happen. There's parts of it that but the way it's done and the kind of left turn over the top way they did it made you go, oh my gosh, I love that. And we were laughing, getting into it and just loving every minute of it. And, Cena was fantastic. The whole cast, they worked well together. And it's the Suicide Squad type of characters. It's not everybody big and buff and,
No, they're kind of the also-rans. They're villains that have been caught. They weren't even a good enough villain to avoid capture. You know what I mean? So
Vigilante was my favorite. He's the geeky, scrawny nerd. He doesn't socialize well. He's like, oh, we're not joking about that anymore. He just doesn't get it.
He's just loaded with weapons and he's got his ninja skills, if you will. You know what I mean? And like you said, of course they're going to win, but boy, there were casualties. There was devastation of getting past. Hey, the world almost got taken over. You know what I mean? It had to be a price, I guess. There definitely were some times of like all the conventions of someone makes a threat and then the guy looks as if he's going to fulfill the threat and then backs down because he's a decent human being. Nope, not if you're a crazed killer, not if you're a sociopath. And so any number of times where it was like, wow, that was abrupt but necessary.
It had, if somebody says, oh, superhero stuff, they're contrived, I don't care for those. It's like, stop a moment, go watch Peacemaker and go watch The Boys, because every episode of The Boys was like, I can't believe they just did that. It's just, and so those are the two that definitely go in different directions and take things in new ways.
I haven't read enough about this, but I read some blip about at one point Peacemaker really disses Green Arrow.
Yes.
That there's and from what I understand now, the actors are actually kind of going back and forth with, who's the wuss in these various different universes. Will those universes ever cross over? And it's kind of funny to see they really, like, these are career making characters, if you will, and yet there's going to be a rivalry. You know what I mean? Who is the bigger vigilante, the bigger dispatcher of the bad guys? It's kind of funny.
I'll have to look that up because I know that's what Reynolds and Hugh Jackman have done. They have that rivalry through Twitter, but they're best friends, and they do it yes, picking on each other, making fun,
right.
and
But
making
to
it
build
very
interest in everything too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
you know. And so I'm wondering how, if they've done, because I know I saw a thing on YouTube. Cena read some of his worst reviews for Peacemaker, and he like made fun of them essentially. And, you know, it was like something about how stupid you are. He's like, yes, so we are. It's just like
That's right.
It was funny.
And as you know, some people have the skip intro available. Through not for that dance sequence. I watch the silly dance every single time.
Every time.
Exactly. Did you tell me this last week? Who choreographed that dance? Alan Tudyk.
Really? I didn't know that.
I just read that apparently he's on set. He's married to one of the female leads, and that they were thinking about doing this Bollywood type thing. And he has skills in that regard. So he just started to say, well, we could do this. We could do this, the little, and the little.
Oh my gosh.
Stuff. And so how wonderful, as you know, him and Nathan Fillion also have that like best bros, just kind of like Zach Braff. Why can't I think of the guy's name from Scrubs? And I love seeing the way that Tudyk keeps kind of popping up in important ways on all kinds of other productions. How cool is that?
I love that. Love that. I'll have to see if Colin even knew that. Be my trivia.
From Alan Tudyk was the pilot on Firefly. From those listening at home, in case you didn't know, and he's been many other things. He's one of those actors that has never been the lead, but he's always an interesting character that's in an addition, a sidekick, a nemesis to what's going on elsewhere.
So we're like approaching episode 90 of the podcast. So anybody listening that did not know who Alan Tudyk was, you need to go back and listen to more episodes. That just should be a common thing, that we should not have to explain to you who Alan Tudyk is.
Exactly. That's boy. One day we're going to have to do that. Like, based on listening to our podcast, here's a quiz to see whether you are. Here's
the knowledge you should make sure you know.
To be an alpha geek, you should know all.
Right. So you mentioned a book you've been reading lately, War of the Archon. What's that?
So it's a 3-book series by a guy named R.S. Ford, and I think it maybe is Robert, but R.S. Ford. And one of those I bought long ago because it looked interesting. Nice pull quotes on the back. A world where magic has gone away for a while and now it's back, and so everybody's fighting over that resource, if you will. Very well written, so that it's got probably 6 different sets of people that you care about. And it does 3 chapters at a time pretty much to advance each of those different stories, and then they intersect and then they break apart again and stuff like that. And just they're well written, so it's like I need to read more, you know what I mean, when I'm going to sleep and I'm not ready to go to sleep yet because I got to find out what happens here. So I love discovering a new author. So I know that there's this 3-book series. Then apparently he has multiple other series like Steelhaven, where as you know, one of my favorite things, out to Amazon we go, out to the used bookstores we go, and try to find things in reasonable condition for a reasonable price, so that if they've been out there for 10 years, there's no reason for me to pay full price. I like the treasure hunt. And so I just ordered the second one because I bought the first one, and sometimes I don't buy the entire series because I'm kind of becoming canny enough of occasionally I bought a threesome and it's like, oh, I don't want to read number 2 and 3. This wasn't good enough. This is one of the ones that it passed the test of I want to read the rest. So A Demon in Silver is the first one. The next one is called The Hangman's Tree. And I don't remember the third one because I didn't buy it, but it'll be in there soon. High recommendation. If you've read a lot of sword and sorcery, magic, this kind of high fantasy type stuff, it holds up well. It's got just the right amount of violence and swearing and humor and believable characters, and the mercenary with a heart of gold, but maybe not, because he's actually done some terrible things, and maybe he's more on a journey of redemption instead of he's always been a good guy. He's done some crap, and he's like, am I really gonna, how do I want to be seen in history? I need to do something to make up for the fact that I was involved in the slaughter of an entire village or something like that.
Right.
Very interesting, complex characters instead of cardboard cutouts.
So who's the author?
R.S. Ford.
R.S.
I think it's Robert Ford, but these are with those initials, R.S. Ford.
Not the old Westerns Robert Ford.
Not that exactly. And I ordered a couple more from Kadri. He's the one that wrote the the guy went to hell and comes back. James Stark, he's known as Sandman Slim, and I think
Oh
there's
yeah.
12 in that series. And I read like the first 3 or 4, and I really devoured them. And I said, let's take a break. Don't make these less effective because you keep getting that same button pushed. And then when I realized, hey, after I finish this one, I kind of want to return to that series. And so that's another one I'll be, over the course of time, picking up all the current 12 at whatever prices I can find. And you know what I mean? It's like, I think I already have like 6 and 7, but I didn't have 5. So I had to buy 5, maybe at more than my usual $7 a book, because I got to go forward. I got to know. Oh, well.
So over the weekend, I like to go to the bookstores. So I found a bookstore in Cincinnati I'll recommend everybody. It's called the Manatee Project. It's actually a charity organization, and they focus on kids' books. And for every book bought, they donate a book for disadvantaged kids to read. Yes. So I was like, well, I got to go check that out. And I bought a whole stack of books. Didn't really necessarily want to buy all these books right now or whatever, but I'm like, hey, they're donating.
There. It's a good cause.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'll put a link to that. Manatee Project.
Funny. I love doing this. We have a chance to set out into the world wonderful things. I think Megan Warren, right?
Yeah.
She's now a young lady from First up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think so.
Right, and moved down to Columbus and she did a program called Books for Bedtime, where she gathered donations of all different kinds of books, and then a lot of what you said, made sure that they got out to the various different schools so that everybody who wanted to have a book got one. And she's now, and I hope I'm not like hundreds of thousands, she's really done this wonderful thing of collecting them and dispersing them, and won a number of awards for, like, she did all this when she was like early teens, maybe even
13,
10,
14.
13, exactly. Now she's in college and got into the good school and that kind of stuff. But one of the reasons she did is because this kid had a cool idea. Mom enabled her. I'm sure it was yes, I'll drive you around. Yes, we'll drop books on and off, that kind of stuff. It's very cool to know someone that didn't just talk about it, that actually did it, and so successfully, and like in that way made the world a better place. Everyone should read. Everyone should learn how to read, to learn the delights of reading. And she was
she embraced it.
Whole linchpin in that. So,
yeah.
So congratulations to you, Megan. That's wonderful.
Yeah, we call her Plot Twist. You'll have to ask her why we call her Plot Twist. It's nothing to do with her book.
I see her. Exactly. She'll probably be at the AG, maybe. I'm not sure. Hopefully that's when she's off summertime from school.
Yeah.
I can't remember where she's going, but like a nice liberal arts school, and just that she hats off to her. Not only did this cool thing, but of course had great grades and did all the right things so that she was able to get scholarships and stuff like that. And from having a single mom, and maybe that's sometimes a constraining factor, instead it looks like her life is on a very nice path. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay.
Shannon Marie, for that. Okay.
Before we go, I have trivia for you.
Okay.
What is if I pronounce this correctly, circumzenithal arc? What is a circumzenithal arc?
So circum and zenith, I mean like a rainbow that goes all the way around or something like that?
Close. Yes. Good.
Like maybe an aura in the sky around a light source, like when you see the light through frozen trees.
It's an upside down rainbow.
Interesting.
And I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, how come that? Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
Because it's just where the sun goes through the mist or the water droplets. It's just the angle of it, instead of being like you normally see it, it's going the other way. So
there you go. It's it's kind of funny. So I guess, hey, vocabulary time. I have this. My dad was great about this. He regularly would like learn a new word and then quiz the kids with it. So what is a fidibus? Fidibus, exactly. And I think it's spelled just like it sounds, Fidibus, maybe. Fidibus.
It's an ancient medieval weapon that you would wear on the heel of your shoe.
So close, exactly. Yeah, in Balderdash, it'd be like, I'm like his. I like from what I understand, it's a torch but in particular, it's rolled up paper that you light, so that it's meant to be, that it will all be consumed, if you will, and like that you light it up and then put it in a sconce or something like that. But it's particularly rolled up paper that you use as a torch.
Wow.
So
okay.
that's what, that's, I don't know. There's so many words out there that like nobody really uses that word anymore. We're not really reading by torchlight or exploring pyramids nowadays.
Right.
Yet,
well, Boy Scout camp, we did stuff like that. So
there you go. Exactly. Okay.
Cool.
Always a pleasure. I hope that I think we're supposed to get enough snowstorms coming this week, but in this world of, I can do everything I want to from home, except go out for a supply run to make sure we have, milk and eggs, that kind of thing.
Right. Yep.
Right.
All right, man. Have a good week. Talk to you later.
You have been listening to the Relentless Geekery Podcast. Come back next week and join Alan and Steven's conversation on geek topics of the week.